morning and welcome to the Managed Security Services Forum Trinidad and Tobago. We're combining an MSS, MSP, and end customer security relationship. We're asking the bigger question, how do we improve that security relationship? Our first panel is going to look at what that managed security service provider should look like, and therefore that's why we've combined managed service providers and managed security service providers. And then our second panel says, well, who's going to lead that? And our second panel asks, well, perhaps we should cherish the technical specialist. So joining me on our panel, we are delighted to welcome Obika Gellineau, Manager IT Security Services at KPMG, Ronald McLean, Group Internal IT Audit Manager, Guardian Group, Trinidad and Tobago, Omar Romero, Managing Director, Rose IT Services Limited. It is a pleasure to have you on, and thanks everyone in the audience for joining. If everyone will start their video. We're in Trinidad and Tobago, and we are very curious because everywhere we go, there is something unique, something to cherish and to highlight. And so before we get into the shape of this MSS of tomorrow or secure managed service provider, we'll get into that distinction. Why don't I start off with you, Obika, and I'll work my way around. Actually, let's challenge the premise of this event. Does it make sense to talk of a Trinidad and Tobago threat landscape or something in relation to cybersecurity? Because isn't cyber wherever you go?
Hi, morning again to everyone. And thanks again, Flem, for inviting me to this forum. I guess I'll start off by saying, it's very, very important to talk about cybersecurity and have an understanding of the threat landscape, especially in Trinidad and Tobago. What happens in one company affects the other company. So as long as somebody is being attacked on one side of the spectrum or in one industry, it's very likely that those attacks are going to cross over into the next industry, because once you are on the internet or once you connect to your systems to the internet, it's like the wild, wild west. It's anybody is at risk, and it changes in nature in terms of how your networks need to be secured from those external attacks. So, I mean, there are a lot of preventative ways, but at the same time, it's always good to have that level of cyber threat intelligence, knowing who are the various actors that are attacking networks. If you're in a particular industry, it's always good to exchange information with like-minded companies who are more or less in the same business. Because if they're being attacked, it's very likely that you may be using the same systems that they're using. And if they're using those same systems, the same attacks that are probably successful on their end are going to be successful with you. So trading of information, understanding, having that discussion on cybersecurity, having that discussion on standards as it relates to cybersecurity is always important. Whether you be in the banking industry, the manufacturing industry, the oil and gas, even public sector and utilities, we're seeing a lot of attacks, not here locally, but at least, away. When you look at things like the Colonial Pipeline, that is a major oil and gas pipeline that basically cut off America for parts of America for a couple of days. And it was a simple ransomware attack through a VPN. And apparently the password to the VPN was already a known password that was available on the internet. So something as simple as that, can take down your entire infrastructure. So it's always important to talk about cybersecurity as well as exchange information as it relates to it.
Absolutely. And that exchange is ever more possible. This medium Zoom, we're all speaking the same language. An incident in the UK, an incident in Trinidad and Tobago, it's going to be an incident. However, Ronald, could you paint us a picture? Obviously, this is more for me and my benefit, but where is Trinidad and Tobago special? We've heard about pipelines and oil and gas. Can you paint a picture in that regard?
Thank you. Morning, everyone. Morning, fellow panelists. Thank you, for having us here. So, I would say, in Trinidad and Tobago, our cyber landscape seems to be, well, we have a lot of interactions with the northern North America, South America, Central America, the UK, the Dutch, other parts of Europe. So our cyber environment, even though a lot of our companies may be either producing locally or managing services locally, they are very connected and integrated in the wider scope of the world. And so with that in mind, when you think cyber, as Obika pointed out, we have to think broader than what we know. So while persons working in the companies within Trinidad and Tobago may be thinking, well, okay, I'm only providing services to this group of people, because we are open to the internet, because we are open to connections that, as you pointed out, also the attack may be similar, and therefore the effect can be similar. So we deal with Trinidad pipelines. We may not be aware, or if we are not mindful of cybersecurity attacks on pipelines, generally within the global scope of pipelines, oil pipelines, we may never have heard about that colonial pipeline attack, and therefore we may think we are safe, when really and truly any attack may be able to exploit the same vulnerability and therefore, affect our operations in the same way. And so that is, I would think Trinidad and Tobago companies and organizations need to really focus their attention on what type of cybersecurity strategy that we are focusing for our operations, because we can't say that we are absolved from any sort of attack or from any impact of any future attacks. And that is where I think we need to be mindful of the environment we are playing in.
I like that because that means if you're a pipeline, that's one scale of company. You're a finance business, that's another. But actually an SMB, which the MSP has to look after all day, every day, is going to be subject to the same sort of attacks. And especially mindful, I know that people in Trinidad and Tobago do a lot of business with the States. There's it's not like when we went and did the virtual Puerto Rico event. Obviously, that's part of the United States, but there's a lot of business being done. So there's a lot of potential, which means that we have to look at the MSP, MSS threat landscape holistically. I mean, we need to keep this roadshow going. So Omar, from your perspective then, because you're an MSP as well, what has the last 2 years done? Has it pushed everyone towards you? Has it pushed everyone to some sort of cloud services, or has it pushed everyone towards the MSP, or both?
Yeah. All right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you again for having me on the session today. And I think that's a really good question in terms of what has the last 2 years done. And I think this conversation is really important for Trinidad and Tobago, because conversations like these raise awareness in terms of the threat of cybersecurity. I think that you asked the question of what makes Trinidad special. It's not necessarily that Trinidad is special, but I think that we like other Caribbean countries, may not be as far along in terms of things like compliance and in terms of things that are going to force that conversation on cybersecurity, right? So over the last 2 years, I think here locally, we have seen, just like the rest of the world, the exponential increase in cybersecurity threats, the bigger threat landscape, the increase in the complexity of the types of things that are happening. We have clients who have seen, like anybody else, an increase in the amount of phishing attempts and ransomware attempts. We've had some high-profile cases here locally, and I think that has helped to stoke that discussion, because it has been in the papers in terms of some really big entities that have been affected. Now, on the MSP side and on our side, we have really tried to do our part in terms of meeting with our clients and explaining why there is a need to harden your infrastructure, to increase your controls, to invest more resources and attention to cybersecurity. I think we still have some way to go because I think especially in the SMB space, a lot of companies feel, well, that's something that was going to happen to a bigger company or it's going to happen to a large company in the US, and this doesn't necessarily affect me. But the truth is that SMBs are the biggest targets because they don't have the best controls in place. So yes, it has pushed a lot of that conversation our way. It has, a lot of people are now looking at that. But I believe there is still some way to go.
Some way to go. So, Omar, on that point, do you think that it is still a case of if security is required by the SMB end customer rather than what? Is it still difficult to convince them?
So there are different elements there, right? Because I'm speaking from the format of being an SMB, MSP, in that as a managed service provider, cybersecurity is a component of the service we provide, but not the full package, because we also have to consider issues around productivity, around balancing those controls we put in place, right? So I don't think it's a question of if, because everybody knows that there are very basic protections or controls they have to put in place. I think in the last 2 years, we've seen a great shift to remote work, right? But that shift to remote work has to be accompanied with controls, because now we literally have people who've just gone home and just in a flash have to access company networks, and there are considerations around that. So I know it's not a case of if, because that's not a difficult thing to explain, but I think we don't necessarily have enough of a priority on it. I think that's where there needs to be improvement. And I just tie it back to we don't have enough compliance guidelines here. I think in the UK and in the US, you have specific regulations like HIPAA and like what your responsibility is and how you manage data and what controls you have in place to prevent a breach. And there can be consequences if you don't adhere to those policies. We don't necessarily have that in place here, so there isn't really that push that says you have to put these things in place. So for us as a provider, there is convincing that we have to do.
No, that's very key, and that convincing that'll be what sets you apart, I think. Ronald, you had your hand up, so you were going to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to actually comment on the fact that I think compliance and governing principles really plays an important factor in getting companies that don't see themselves as a high risk factor in this cybersecurity warfare that is going on globally. I think that is where we need the drive, so that it forces the consideration, because a lot of companies, as Omar alluded to in Trinidad, they see themselves as a lot smaller than an American or a UK company. And so they think attacks only matter based on size. And if I am only managing our $100 million portfolio in TT dollars, which when you translate it is not that big in either US or the UK, in US or pounds, then they think that nobody would want to attack me. And in the absence of regulations and in the absence of that governing principle for our region, these companies get away with not strengthening their cybersecurity profile, with not strengthening and hardening their network. They get away with, refusing MSP's guidance and not having to take managed security services because there isn't a culture of it being mandatory. And I think if we really want to drive the cybersecurity profile that people should adopt, we have to start with governing principles. We have to start with, the GDPRs and the compliance like SOC, or, our version or flavor of those type of compliance for us, for our region. And it has to be that it gives consideration to size, yes. It gives consideration to financial impact, but it also gives consideration to connectivity. Because when I first started, exploring cybersecurity back in the early 2000s, there were a lot of attacks where data was lost, and it wasn't that they attacked the Pentagons or the large companies. They attacked the small houses that manage the data, manage the backup, which people thought were not, it wasn't necessary to secure a backup. Who would attack my backup? But these threat actors, they know the value in data. They know the value of getting your information. And so they see all of the avenues. And so they aren't going based on size or your financial portfolio. They're going on the fact that if I get that information, whatever sliver of information I'm looking for, then I can use it for my profit, for whether it be global warfare, financial gain, just for, being a nuisance. That is how we need to start seeing these things. And so that shift over the last 2 years of people, relying on their MSPs more, should also come with that conversation of governance, should also come with some mandatory guidelines and fines, because of course nobody makes the step unless there's some cost attached to not making the step. Right? So that is what I wanted to add to what Omar said.
And that's key, isn't it? Because everyone thinks, it's just about SaaS products, that people are perennially going after MSPs and saying, come on, please bundle my new SaaS product and it'll turn you into whatever. But more fundamentally, you need to protect yourself. And actually, we have a nice comment in the audience. Candice says, the facts are internet flattens geography, cybersecurity affecting US, UK, Russia can just as easily affect here in the Caribbean. There has been an uptick in AnyDesk and TeamViewer overuse by remote clients since the shift to home. However, those aren't secure enough to prevent breaches to company networks. Thank you very much, Candice. Obika, you had a hand up. Sorry, what do you see in all this? Because, of course, your perspective is, again, slightly different. You're an MSS.
Mm-hmm. I'll just start with saying that culture is extremely important when it comes to security within the organization. And it kind of goes back to what Omar and by extension Ronald said. It always starts at the top, and the top is the one who has to push it to the rest of the organization. So many a time I've had to dealing with clients, having to have discussions with C-suite persons and board level persons about the importance of cybersecurity. And it always comes back to telling them that how, the whole purpose is of an attacker is just for information. And that information can lead to other things. It can lead to they getting more financial gain, or whether it be through a ransomware attack or some other type of attack, or it ends up damaging your company. Because at the end of the day, some attackers don't really, want to gain money out of a company. Some attackers want to just destroy, we're always constantly seeing in the press, ransomware and all these large payouts and stuff like that. But do you know that over the years, persons or victims who have been getting these ransomware attacks have stopped paying? So it's no longer a lucrative business for attackers to do ransomware attacks. So this is now changing the landscape, and now you're seeing a lot of increased phishing attempts. And the reason being is because those phishing attempts are getting very successful. It's giving the attackers information in terms of getting into persons' emails, getting a hold of account numbers, seeing the way in which people do business, and trying to formulate an attack to try and see if they could get some sort of money out of that attack through maybe even a spear phishing campaign. And all these things I kind of have to describe and list out, as a way to indicate the importance to these C-suite executives and these board members that attacks are not necessarily all the time financial gain, but eventually it leads to some sort of loss to the business, whether it be directly, indirectly, and it could even shut down your operations or your management functions. It can do serious reputational damage to your brand. Even coming back to something that Ronald said earlier, he said that most of the attacks came from the small data centers where the backups were housed. I always remember the Target attack that happened, I think, sometime around 2016, 2017, I think somewhere around there, where the attackers got onto their registers. And well, their registers are a little bit different to how it is in Trinidad, where you can swipe the card on the register and do the payment on the register. The attackers got into the register and they swiped over, I think it was like 40 million cards or something like so during the Christmas season. Yeah, it was a lot of cards. And from there, they started running transactions and taking money from persons and making purchases and so on. That attack actually came from the HVAC or, the air conditioning vendor for Target. So in other words, the attackers never actually went directly through Target systems. They actually went through their third-party vendor, realized that the vendor had the ability to get in to Target's network. And then from there, they launched their attack on Target's payment systems. So it's a risk-based system that, you have to constantly analyze, review over and over again, take a look at all your various assets, have an understanding of your entire organization, both at a first-party level and a third-party level. Understand who is doing what for you, where responsibilities lie, where your losses can come from. Even though unfortunately in the Caribbean, we do not have regulators enforcing, fines as it relates to these cyber breaches. You can't just think of, okay, the regulator not doing it, so therefore I don't need to do it. You have to do it because it impacts your business in either financially or operational wise. You are going to lose out at the end of the day. And you need to, focus on this as much as you focus on your revenue, your profits, and any other form of the business, any other productivity of the business, because it can affect those things, whether it be directly or indirectly.
Which makes the managed service provider and managed security service provider both attractive for a potential attacker. And maybe it's the SaaS, maybe it's the HVAC. It's a route. It's a route in. Now, there aren't many MSPs that get completely compromised and give away the keys to the kingdom to everything, because internally things are segmented and so on. But threat vectors don't seem to care, right? They don't seem to care, which means that's why we run this event. We want to improve the MSP, MSS, and customer security relationship. Shiva makes a great point. Ransomware groups have leveraged AnyDesk to deploy malware. I believe Avos Locker ransomware was one. Very, very good point. And we'll see you, Shiva, later on today. Omar, so you had your hand up. What were your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I just following up on what Obika is saying and him having those conversations with executives and C-suite and stuff. And I don't envy those conversations, because I can understand exactly what he has to go through, because again, this goes through to the point of having to convince. But what I would say is that what has helped that conversation for us when we have those conversations is to understand that those persons don't necessarily understand in the way that we do when we try to explain the different topics on cybersecurity. Like if we talk about ransomware, or if we talk about threat vectors, or if we talk like those terms don't necessarily convert. And what we have done in our conversations is we've made it very tangible and relatable in terms of what is it going to look like if you leave this door open and this happens, right? So this is how much downtime you can expect to your business. This is going to be the cost of engaging cybersecurity consultants. This is going to be the cost of remediation. This is what it's going to look like on the day when your customers are calling and you can't log into any machine. This is what you're going to see on a workstation. And then we ask the questions like, there's a big gray area where I can tell you, if you have a ransomware attack, what the projected remediation costs will be. But I want you to tell me what the cost to your company is going to be of being down for a week, right? Of your customers not being able to contact you. And what is going to be the reputational cost of your business being compromised, right? And I think that sort of gets the wheels turning like, oh, okay, I do understand that this is why it's important, because I didn't understand that this is the scale of it or what this was going to cost, right? And I think that is what sort of then, that helps them to better understand why they need to attach priority to it. So we've tried in our conversations to really dumb it down and stay away from technical terms and stuff like that. We do provide the information, but we try to speak in terms of, for your company, this is what we're trying to prevent, because we know what other companies who went through the exact same thing have experienced, and it's very painful, right? And I think that helps a lot when we have those type of conversations.
And do you think then, maybe this is a good one for Ronald, so those conversations that Omar was talking about, does that mean that you become not just a trusted advisor for break fix or fixing printers, right? And I know you don't fix printers, but you know what I mean, not that type of MSP work, but you start to become a trusted security advisor, which is a bit of an odd place, because 5 or maybe 10 years ago, managed service providers may have said, oh no, not touching that, it's not my thing. So Ronald, do you think all MSPs will need to be an MSSP, or is there some sort of happy medium?
I would say, first off, I guess it depends on what you project your core business to be. But definitely, I would say within the last 10 years, there has been a shift. IT is less of a spend and more of a partner to the business. And therefore, as an MSS, you can't ignore the fact that there are some aspects of your job that you need to relate to the business operations. And as an MSP, there are aspects of your job that you need to also consider from a sort of like I need to protect my investment in your company, which means because I'm providing you a service, I don't want that something happens to you that affects my reputation, because obviously they will remember that something happened to you, and then they will ask, who was your provider? And if I am the provider, then automatically, whether I preach that it was because of something you did, they would say, so, why didn't I advise? Or how come I didn't, give them a better package or incorporate this level of security in my service? And I think with that in mind, both MSPs and MSS organizations need to relook really and truly, what is that, defining line where I want to hold true to my MSS services that I'm good at, but I also want to be in a position so that should my client require it, I can also give them that, provider type version of a service, or if I'm a provider, that I can allude to the level of security services that should be at least a minimum or a baseline that I work with, so that it protects me, it protects them, and there's that holistic approach where I am now, as an IT organization, providing enablement to your business process, while minimizing the risk factor of, downfall to your operations or downfall to your client base or your revenue streams. And so, yes, I do believe there is that shift where if you think of IT services now as an enabler to the business, you as an MSS will tend to, develop your services towards an MSSP, even though you may hold true to your core MSS services. You may be 75% MSS, but that 25% gonna be like, here what guys, if you need, I have this additional service that can, either additional or, it could be incorporated, but there's this additional service that will help you make a better investment, either, for yourself, and same thing on the MSP side, have that additional security conversation. Even, and again, it may be that you have it internally to offer, or you're working with a third party to, make some sort of hybrid model. But I do believe that the conversation should be had where that hybrid happens.
And I can understand how it might be tricky for the MSP, because imagine you probably get people knocking on your door every day, say, hey Ronald, please, I've got the most amazing new SaaS products, please bundle it. Your customers will lap it up, they'll love it, they'll buy 3 million subscriptions. And you're like, well, hang on, it's it's tricky. So you have to balance it. Sorry, I saw Obika, you had your hand up, and then I'll come to you, Omar. Obika, what are your thoughts? I mean, does the world of the MSS want to partner with the MSPs? Is that a possibility?
So we have actually partnered with MSPs in terms of providing, not only providing our clients with their products, but it also works the other way around. When anytime they engage a client, we actually come in with the necessary, I guess, services in terms of knowledge and experience with the configuration and the security around their product to better, lock it down and ensure that it's as secure as possible at the client, and ensure that, the client reduces their surface area of attacks with the particular product. So it is much of a partnership, or I think you could say a strategic alliance that we formed with certain MSPs as it relates to what we do. What I would say is that, coming out from what Ronald was saying, not everybody's an expert. So as a MSP, you can, bring people into your company to handle that security aspect, right? And use that as part of your business. But if it may not be a good thing for you to do, partner up with a third party MSS, try and get someone who you may want to form a business partnership with, and let them help you along in terms of your journey, in terms of giving those products to those clients. And on top of giving the products, ensuring that the security is there to better, strengthen that client's posture, security posture with your product. So it's always important to have a security conscious perspective when you're providing a product to a client, and ensuring that you have the necessary experience, whether it be in-house or through a strategic alliance, to better, get that product or to the client. And I guess on the MSS side, having that partnership in reverse, maybe when you're doing security for a client, you may see a problem. Let's say, for example, maybe the client doesn't have a CRM system that they could benefit from. So having that strategic alliance, you might be like, well, I'm working here with an MSP. They have a CRM that might be actually able to improve your operations. It works out as well. So always, take that approach as it relates to delivering services to the client. If you're MSS or MSP, find those strategic alliances where they are, and if you maybe can't get that strategic alliance as an MSP, see if you could get somebody in-house.
Okay. Yeah, in-house, also a possibility. And we'll get on to the architect in-house later, which is quite a fun thought. Omar, you had your hand up, but I want to add to a question to you, Omar. Given that there is quite a bit of oil and gas and also finance in Trinidad and Tobago, as well as a lot of SMEs, or SMBs, depends how you say it. Do you think that we're going to see an MSP that looks after IT, but also OT? Or is that crazy? Is that something completely out of the question?
So, I mean, just before I touch that, just to follow up on what Obika is saying, that I think, and like you alluded to, for an MSP, it is critical, I think, that that cybersecurity is part of the service offering. Like in our journey, like when we started out, I mean, cybersecurity was not our favorite thing, right? There are controls or basic controls that we would have in place, but it's really its own space. Like cybersecurity is really its own animal, and our focus as an MSP, besides managing everything in the IT, is that we are really focused on introducing things that help our customers to be profitable, right? And because for a long time in the past, cybersecurity was seen as a cost center, right? That's always a lot more difficult. Like that's managing two different things in terms of selling, but that has changed, right? And I think for an MSP, it would be, frankly, a bit irresponsible if for your customers, you are not ensuring that they are adequately protected. Now, it's not a one size fit all, because in different industries and different client sizes and different environments, they all have different needs for cybersecurity, but it changes so much, right? I mean, at one point it was spamming, at one time it was phishing, it was ransomware, and then it's now ransomware becoming more and more complex, and that's probably going to change. That will continue to change, and it's very difficult without internal resources to keep up with those changes in a way that you are in front of exactly what's going on. So that's where it becomes important, even if you don't have those resources in-house, to partner with an MSS, to partner with a provider that you can rely on to build that adequate protection. Because at the end of the day, as the MSP, providing that service for the client, the fact is that you know this stuff the best, right? And I think you have to convey that listen, you need to do this, right? And this is what has to happen. With regards to your other question in terms of the oil and gas industry, I think, yeah, definitely that's something you can see. I think what I have been observing, and this may be as a function of the MSP or managed service industry not maturing just as yet in Trinidad, and that's now coming along, is that a lot of oil and gas companies, they they have entities down there, but everything is managed internally. So they have a mothership and they have their own protocols and they have their own, they have an IT department or provider who basically, what you have down here is just a site, right? But everything comes from the mothership, right? And it may be that they are not aware that they have capable resources right here in Trinidad who can take care of those things, right? Or it could be that they have their own policies and they don't necessarily want to skew those policies by partnering with a provider who may have their own policies. So like you mentioned that all the different types of SaaS services and products and stuff that are available, that's always kind of up to the provider. Like for us, like we would go through all this, but we decide in terms of, there's so many different ways to skin a cat, right? But you have, that kind of relies on the provider, right? So, but I think that will grow because not even here in Trinidad, but even regionally, there's so much expansion in that sector, and there are the need for local resources that can provide great value in that space. So I think, yeah, there's a big opportunity there, but I guess it's just determining what the right fit is.
And you raise a good point, because let's say it's a big oil and gas company. Well, yeah, they've already got things in place back in another country. So maybe that's not going to be the avenue for a local Trinidad and Tobago company. But upstream, downstream, refining, all sorts of opportunities there, plus finance, another great sector. And you see in some countries the emergence of the legal centric MSP, because they love all things legal. And I've seen healthcare MSS out there as well. So maybe that this will be another niche. What do you think, Ronald? Because I guess I want to take this to the direction of, well, where is the MSP and the MSS headed in Trinidad and Tobago?
So I think you raised a very valid point there. When you think of the managed service provider landscape, Trinidad is, I would say, a limited number of industries. So you have your finance, you have your manufacturing, you have your public sector, you have your oil and gas, you have your energy products. And as you alluded to, there are also the upstream and downstream sides to these things. So you may have bauxite and out of that aluminum, etc. I think where an MSP wants to head, and by extension an MSS, is looking at the landscape, understanding where we are, also understanding now that the pandemic has shown us the world is a playing field, and we're no longer bound by geographical lines anymore. I think MSS and MSP are in, like, now is the ripe time to make a play, or put some strategy towards developing a futuristic business model that, yes, we are covering our core IT, but we also want to help persons understand that OT side of the landscape. Because now, if you want to, as a business, you want to operate, let's say in the Netherlands, you have to consider what are the legal ramifications of the Dutch operating procedures. If you want to go to the UK, or you want to do business with China, you want to do business with Russia, Ukraine, America, you need to understand that global landscape. Just for your business product or service that you're going to offer. And as an MSP or MSS, if you are entering into an environment where the client, provides services in these different landscapes, it would be remiss if you do not put things in place that you either make sure that you're not liable for any breach to these different environments, as well as you're not exposing the client to liability that could have been prevented had you been more aware of what is being extended. And so, I'll take an example. When America issued this FATCA order, where they have to identify, where they identify US citizens doing work in abroad countries, and they have to, capture tax that should be paid back to the US government. They basically ordered that all providers of data capturing services must collect that information and submit a report. And so if you are not aware as an MSP, you turning up software for all of your clients, and you're not advising them that within that software, there needs to be this capture of this data. That is a mandatory requirement. There needs to be any development of this report. That is a mandatory requirement. Then you're basically doing a disservice because you're not giving them the full understanding of the landscape they are playing in. And some of these companies would have at that time been now extending themselves into different territories. And as the MSP or MSS provider, you should be the one to kind of pioneer, because to me, that is where you get your value. You get your value because you pioneered your clients to becoming better at their job. And as Omar alluded to, you're trying to balance service provision with clients' profitability. And I think if you can show your clients that you can add to their profitability by reducing the fees or fines that they are exposed to, or enhancing their operational model beyond what is expected of an IT service provider, then you add some credibility and some quality to your service. And so now you can sell that goodwill because you can show people that by example, you don't just give them what is the bare minimum as an IT provider, but you're also going to the level above, which is why whatever your rates are is justified. And so that now helps them understand the benefits of coming with you. So I would say definitely an MSP or MSS organization wants to think about that strategy in terms of how they can add that value to their client in understanding now the global stage that they are performing or providing their products to.
And that would make you truly a trusted advisor. And you can start. I mean, to be fair, it's a business, right? You can advise them on lots of things. You could give them PR advice. You can help them with geopolitical advice. I mean, if it is required and if it is relevant. But I'd like to ask that same question to Obika from an MSS perspective, because we've got to move on to our next panel. But I'd be curious, what's your message for our event today? Where's the MSS headed, and if possible, the MSS in TNT?
What I would say is that the MSS comes in not so much on the technology side. The MSS tends to come in on the people and the process side. A lot of times I've been approached by clients. They have a lot of technology in place. They have the things like the carbon black, the silence, they have the FortiGate firewalls, they have everything in place. They do penetration tests and so on. But they don't have any awareness training in their organization. So in other words, most of their employees may not be able to detect a phishing email, especially if it's a spear phishing email. Your policies and your procedures are out of date. They've not kept up with the changes in the technology and your internal architecture. So what I would say is that the MSS tends to come in, and actually you said it as well, as a trusted advisor, somebody who comes in and takes a look at your people and your process and tries to bring you up to speed in terms of, okay, I have all these various technologies doing the prevention and maybe even the detection or and recovery of my systems. But I don't know, what processes or my people in terms of whether or not they are security conscious. So what do I need to do now in order to get them security conscious? What do I need to do in terms of my processes and procedures in order to harden them? Same way how you harden your technology, same way you have to harden those processes to ensure that, a spear phishing attack is not successful. I mean, I'll give you an example. A very famous spear phishing attack happened recently with Lake Asphalt, where the attacker actually pretended to be one of the vendors. And as a result, they were able to change up the numbers for a transfer. And unfortunately, the company lost, I think it was recorded in the Express as $2 million, I believe, if I remember correctly. That could have been prevented by a simple phone call or double check or a validation of the account numbers, or even a call back to the particular vendor to find out, to just confirm that, these are the correct account numbers and so on and so forth. Those kind of things, looking at those processes, looking at those procedures, trying to update it, trying to get staff trained and accustomed to a security conscious standpoint is where MSS tends to come in and add value to the client and add value to what they do. And I think that is the direction that MSS is going towards. And I think that is where we are seeing a lot of strength in terms of what we provide to the client. I mean, there's also the technology side, but I think having those conversations and assisting the client in those types of areas of security has ended up benefiting the client a lot more in the long run, as opposed to the technology, because we've focused so much on technology that we've let those areas lapse.
Absolutely. I like that. And that's a great point, because people always go, well, my sparkly new box is the answer. It's like, well, but there's methodology behind it. There's advice. There's the trusted advisor. And, security would all be very different if we just plugged in one box for your intranet and then it's done. I mean, that it'd be a different world, wouldn't it? Which I think is tricky. In the audience, we got some nice comments. Surendra says awareness training and also incident response procedures and teams are usually two major gaps. Ronald, you replied, lack of awareness has been a major downfall to many organizations. Right. We are a bit over time, but I thought I'd let it go on because, this is good. This is good stuff. We're getting to the heart of what we're trying to do, which is how do we improve the MSS, MSP, and customer relationship. We're looking in this panel how we improve or where the MSP and MSS are headed in TNT. So, Omar, Obika, Ronald, a big virtual round of applause for you. Thank you very much for coming on, and I will put you back in the audience.
Thank you very much. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks for the invitation. And
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
See you soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And thank you for all your comments. And if you are going to, or if you intend to chat to the whole group, please do select everyone. Otherwise, it just comes to me, which is absolutely fine. Somebody asked about our YouTube channel, where we have a lot of other videos. And for example, the videos we did for the MSS Jamaica and MSS Puerto Rico, that was on our YouTube channel. You can see it. You can see it there. We'd love for you to subscribe, become part of our community. If you want me to post that in the link again, I will do so. Right. So swiftly moving on, we need to look at the other half of this question. Obviously, Trinidad and Tobago is a wealth of skills and capabilities in the world of cybersecurity and IT. We know this not just because internally there's a lot of great colleagues, but also because there are loads of colleagues in TNT who either do move to other countries or work for those countries remotely. So we know that this is a burgeoning question. So the question is, in order to improve the managed service provider, managed security service provider, and end customer security relationship, should we start to cherish technical ability? Should we start to look towards the architect? So let me bring up our next panelists, and I will give them an introduction. And yes, thank you, Mark. Great panel. Just make sure I have everybody. Fantastic. Okay. So welcome to the stage, Shiva Parasram, Chief Cybersecurity Awareness Training Officer, Computer Forensics and Security Institute, Shiva Bissessar, Managing Director, Pinaka Consulting, and Anthony Peyson, Information Technology Consultant, FRISC Business Services Limited. Thank you for coming on today. We're very pleased to continue the MSS World Tour and shine a light on, well, most recently, the Caribbean. And we're delighted to have just looked at the future shape of the MSS and the MSP. But we need to ask, what about the skills behind it? What about the technical leader? Now, you might say, well, of course, technical leadership, it's all technical, it's IT. But the reason we ask this question is because maybe, and this, we'll put this out there, it might not be true, people that don't understand IT might try and push technical specialists and architects to be more. And we'll get into what more might look like, because more might push them away from their technical background. See, I'm being a bit diplomatic there. Anthony, let me start with you and I'll work my way around. Let's look at TNT as a landscape. First of all, is there, from a skills perspective, is there enough of a distinction between an IT specialist and an IT security specialist?
Thank you very much for that question. So from my experience, there hasn't been enough out there in terms of educating the general public, as well as those who are in charge of recruitment and those who make decisions in organizations on what are the major differences between what's an IT specialist and what's an IT security specialist, right? And what are the differences? So, and this is based on my experience as well as observations on ads, local ads, where recruiting agencies as well as organizations are looking for talent. And when you look at the job descriptions, you see where there's a lack of distinction or a lack of knowledge on the difference between a security role and a standard or general IT role. And because there are other business issues within our local environment. You would find many organizations will try their very best to merge multiple roles into one. And why they do that is because they are trying to save money. It's all about money, right? So they are trying to save money. So they will take a security role and a general IT role, and they will merge those roles and create probably a new role or a new position within their company. And what you would find happening is that a candidate will come in and they will have to focus on IT as well as IT security. So I don't think there's enough out there or enough awareness, especially within recruiting and within organizations, on the distinctions and why there is a distinction between IT security and general IT.
And that's key then, isn't it? Because if people are, it depends who's the recruiter. Is it an IT security hiring manager going out looking for IT security versus, for some reason, it's been put in the lap of HR, and HR thinks, oh, well, it's all the same. You know, it's a problem worldwide. If that happens in a given geography, which is why I have observed a common trope or a common accusation that's been made against architects, engineers, developers by HR, who are not initiated in some cases, they can't communicate. And I think that's quite offensive, because they can communicate. It's just what they're trying to say is maybe above the heads of, some professionals in a business. Now, all joking aside, Shiva, Parasram, how do we then balance that? Because we're trying to train the next generation to ultimately either be the in-sourced IT security specialist or the outsourced managed security service specialist. How can we help them with this distinction?
That's a pretty good question, and those were some excellent points brought up by Anthony there and yourself, actually, because yes, it is a global issue. I've had some HR persons reach out to me, and they've been looking for IT specialists who they would try and fit into that groove of cybersecurity specialists. But the first thing that they always let me know is that they've been on Google and they've looked at positions about what other companies have done and have hired. But of course, it's different for every single company. Your posture is different. Your finances are also different. Your budget is also different. So, I mean, even when you look at it from an MSS perspective, it's more about people and processes. So I guess it is up to communication of those hiring in particular to educate themselves and maybe speak to persons like ourselves, look at the job market, look at even available courses, talk to schools. I have a lot of friends at Big Four companies as well that reach out to me. If they look for someone. Over the past 2 years, we've trained hundreds of students. We even have a WhatsApp group called a Security Army, which is where we try to discuss all of these things and bring things to the attention of persons up there. But I think it's very unfortunate that we see so many ads out there, like Anthony was speaking about, where, for example, I think I saw one with, it was just for an IT security specialist, and they required things like CISA, CISM, CISSP, CCIE for a salary that would pay, let's say, less than 2,000 US per month. So to obtain these certifications in the first place, you spend thousands of US dollars, not just on the exam, but on training. And I think it's very important for people to, hiring persons in particular, to understand these things and know that it's not just a degree. It's not just a master's degree. It's not just about understanding governance. It's not about communication. These are very, very specialized roles you have there. Your policies, your governance, your frameworks, those are great. But if you don't have the technical strength behind you to enforce and to monitor and to respond and take the initiative, vulnerability assessment, threat intelligence, all of these things, you are going to have issues. And I'm not sure how we address it from the point of the HR perspective, but I think that IT managers in particular may need to communicate more effectively and say, listen, this is exactly what we need. This is what I am looking for. This is what I need to be done. But of course, then it depends on whether or not the IT manager understands what they actually require in that particular sense.
And I think people in the audience agree with you. Gabriel says TT has not been a security conscious society generally, so often their response is reactive and tend to deploy IT specialists with a broad brush. Surendra says locally it is all one and the same to employers and recruiters, red team, blue team, GRC incident, SOC analysts, all in the security package. But hopefully, as people look to have back office MSPs and MSS from TNT, even if they are operating out of the States or perhaps Latin America, hopefully this will change, along with oil and gas, perhaps making use. Shiva, Bissessar, what's your thought then? Because with all of this pushing to say, well, you're all the same, you're all IT, quote unquote, is there also a pressure, especially when we look at career path progression, to turn a technical specialist into a business analyst? I mean, it sounds good on paper, doesn't it? Sounds good. Oh, yeah, I'm a business analyst. But I mean, is that actually a pressure that people are facing?
To convert to a business analyst, I think what Peyson said earlier is important. That it's from a cost perspective, when recruitment goes out to try to find talent, they just try to roll everything into one. The technical specialist is different from the security specialist. Even within the IT field, you have specializations within IT. And then so there needs to be that recognition. So I would say rather than push towards business analysts, what businesses needs to do is do a proper risk assessment. I think a lot of us are operating still in 2 decades ago. We don't recognize the risk that is out there today. We see large entities falling victim to cybercrime, and it's noted within the news. And but do you adjust your risk appetite after that? Do you then inform your organizational processes after that? Do you then inform what your organizational structure looks like after that? I think that's the level we need to get to. And the point you raise, transitioning or trying to fit a technical specialist into that business role, that is something that we need to look out for. I think the point brought up earlier with respect to can they converse is a significant point. There seems to be the thinking that you have persons just behind the desk that just sit behind a desk and that's it. That's all they do all day. But they are eloquent. They're competent. They understand risk, and I would say to specialize further within the IT security field rather than pushing into a business role. But overall, from an organizational perspective, I'd say risk needs to be properly evaluated, and then once evaluated, reflections need to be taken as to what the organization looks like and what the organization needs, and define those roles within the organization towards a more defined security posture.
And that defined security posture could hopefully let us find a career path for the engineer. So let's try and marry this engineer architect question with our previous panel. Anthony, if there is an assumption that, we'll get the engineer to do this, do that, be a generalist, be a specialist, be everything. Is it not possible that with the emergence of more managed security service providers or managed service providers that need security capabilities, that this could be a positive step in TNT because it means that they could be cherished for being themselves. They don't have to, it's not, I think some people on LinkedIn and Twitter like to put these comics out and say, you know, I'm a leader, and actually then nobody's a leader, right? Surely we can use this MSS framework to cherish or foster engineering skills. You're on mute, sorry.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question. The short answer is yes to your question. And just expand on it, right? The managed security service provider has a role to play in almost any organization. Why? Because we are living in a world where cost is king, right? So most companies may not be able, and speaking from experience, and we're looking at like SMEs, you know, small to medium-sized enterprises, may not have the resources, financial resources, to hire a security architect or a security engineer and security technicians or security analysts, right? They may not be able to have a separate security functional role within their organizations. So what can they do? The best course of action is to outsource, is to look for a vendor that can do that for you. Because if you don't do something, something can happen that will impact on your business negatively. You need to have someone looking at your security architecture, looking at your security systems. You may not have the in-house resources to do it. So, you know, look for a vendor that can do it for you. It will safeguard your organization. Managed security service providers also provide awareness training. They also provide, they may also provide certifications or training, IT training that they can offer to specific staff members or to all of your staff. And what that will do is it will improve the capacity, the internal capacity that you will have within your organization. It will now transform your organization, the culture within your organization, to be a more security aware, more risk aware culture. And what that will do, it will help prevent some of the you know, the big type of the big impacting or the high impacting cybersecurity attacks that we see on a day-to-day basis. Phishing attacks and even ransomware attacks can be prevented by having a properly security aware culture or security aware workforce. So the MSS can provide services that will help small to medium-sized organizations, large enterprises, build the internal capacity within their organization. So if you don't have an engineer, or you have probably a security analyst, and you want that person to be upskilled, you can use the services offered by a managed security service provider to help build that capacity within your organization.
And it doesn't mean that you lose your job, does it? Because you as an architect, I mean, this sounds like good news, because this is just another part of the architecture.
Correct. Not everyone will be as secure in their jobs or in their roles, right? Mm-hmm. So you would have some professionals feeling insecure because they may not understand fully what is the role that the managed security service provider, what role they play within the security strategy of the organization. So they may feel threatened, but there is a specific role for MSS within organizations that should not threaten the jobs or the positions of security architects, security engineers, or even security analysts.
No, that's a great and positive point, especially when we're talking about this future architect. A few comments and things have come in. I'll just do a shout out, and then we'll sort of ask our next question. Candice says the old adage states we can change ourselves, not others. With that being said, we should look inwardly how to break down the topic of security for the layman. For example, when we go to the doctor, bedside manner and clear, simple communication is important. Same applies to a technical specialist or security expert. Gabriel says in trying to fix the situation, IT personnel must also identify their organization's the differences, although I understand that their fear of losing a job as in the sight of their employers due to limited knowledge, they can be seen as inadequate, which that's a good factor. Joel says, excellent points. Numerous organizations are trying to fit all IT hats into Superman role, and the super architect, right? But it's not feasible. With budgets being slashed across the globe, decision makers need to be made aware of the risks and mitigations that could be flagged by specialist IT security companies and MSSPs. We certainly have the talent here in TNT, as can be seen by all the hosts. Very good. So that talent, Shiva, you're fostering lots of talent. This career path, how do we foster it? How do we get it together? And does talent and career path management need to go hand in hand with these very expensive certifications?
That's a pretty good question. The thing is, you have to understand that a certificate is just that. It's just a piece of paper saying that you studied for this exam, you've managed to pass an exam. That's really all it says. The talent is actually the amount of work that the person and the individual puts into it, creating labs and tinkering and all of these things. I guess for employability, you do need a particular set of certification, but I think we've seen a bit of progress where you have a lot of the larger companies openly stating that they will hire you based on your talent and what you can do, rather than just if you have 15 or 20 certs behind your name and everything under the sun, which makes you look very good on paper. But we have so many different options. Some of them are free. There are a lot of sites like I think TryHackMe and these sites now where you can get exposure. But I think particularly in Trinidad, a lot of people see getting into IT and cybersecurity that you need to be so very well versed in programming to begin with. Yes, I do agree that understanding some programming is essential and so on, but IT and cybersecurity is so much more into every asset of life and every aspect. You have cybersecurity at some point. So I think it's about even making the younger ones a lot more aware that yes, you too can easily get into cybersecurity. You don't have to, be able to read code and hexadecimal and all of these things. There are a lot of camps, there are lots of startups. Even myself and some of my guys, we offer almost monthly free training to up to about 500 persons in cybersecurity and getting involved, getting started, certifications. Yes, there are a lot of certifications out there that can get you employed, because obviously when you look at a lot of these job sites, you would see, some of the common ones, but I think there's also a flood or a bit of overkill in the market for some of these cybersecurity certifications, and some of them are very expensive, starting from maybe 500 US all the way up to thousands of US dollars. And then on top of that, we have to look at maintaining this skill set, maintaining this talent. You have to recertify. Every month, there's something new in IT, cybersecurity. And unfortunately, with economies that may be catching up or not doing too well, you still have a lot of legacy equipment, which means that your IT specialists, your cybersecurity specialists, they are left putting out fires for network and communications and, working with legacy equipment in general, worrying about ransomware, battling everything under the sun. So then now, does it mean that the cybersecurity professional still has to know about systems admin, network admin? Then do you go in that direction up from, starting at the systems or networking, then systems? What about forensics? What about incident response? But I think this is where people need to be a bit more educated and aware of what is out there and understand that you do not have to be, I guess, the Elon Musk of IT and cybersecurity. You can just start slowly and go into something where you like it, if it's vulnerability assessment or securing networks, building secure networks, scalable networks. All of these things have their place in IT and cybersecurity. So certification, I think, is great, but I think people need to be aware of the certification overload, especially some of these companies that ask for everything under the sun, from Cisco, Microsoft, Fortinet, Checkpoint, EC Council, everything out there. But I would suggest to those in the audience there, just take your time, start off slowly, try out some of those sites like TryHackMe. They have rooms for absolute beginners out there, and see what you like, what you're attracted to. Maybe just start from there and see where you end up. And
even I've tried a CTF on the most basic level. I didn't get very far, but the attempt got me far.
Exactly.
Which I think is useful. And you make a great point. And I know I can appreciate it. If I'm a developer out there and I've spent my entire life in the weeds and I love developing, the last thing I want to hear is that someone who's done, English literature all their life is just going to segue and suddenly become the genius of developing. But here's the problem. That's not a reality. It's much more possible that we'll get someone from an unrelated field segueing into cybersecurity. And yet we might find at least the HR level, they'll equate cybersecurity with Kubernetes developer. It's not the same, right? And perhaps that's a positive message that we can, do it. And I think, you mentioned TryHackMe. Obika, I think, has put letsdefend.io, Hack the Box, things like that. Lots of great things to get you started. Are you curious? Do you like a Rubik's Cube puzzle? And yes, it'd be great to have lots of sysadmins segueing across too. So Shiva, this then tells me, this is why we got the architect panel. Is the architect, the juggler of all this SaaS and all of these services, is the architect the key to improving the end customer security relationship? And that's for Shiva Bissessar, sorry.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, so I would say the architect is a step in the right direction. The architect to me, or the security architect to me, presents a vision within the organization, or a recognition within the organization that we take this thing seriously. And whether it's an in-house person or it's an outsourced to MSS, having that competency or having that level of even a sounding board, somebody being able to bounce ideas off and get that advisory from, that represents to me a step in the right direction of recognition of the gravity of the situation that companies are in, large organizations are in, worldwide. And, we need to step up. We need to step up, be it MSME or whatever your size of your organization is. Cost is a factor, but you have to look at this as a possible long-term goal within your organization towards securing your assets. And that's why I would always place it within the risk management portfolio. It is when you acknowledge the risks that your entity is facing day to day in business operations, then you have to recognize the need for these type of dedicated resources that you can tap into.
And those resources, they're there for you. And as you might be bundling a new SaaS solution, you might be doing some other form of architecture, but it's very different to coding. It baffles me that some people may not see the difference. So Anthony, then, do you think we should start to cherish the more technical architects who are, in a way, the last people in an organization internally who can, well, vet an MSS, but also translate the business needs? And maybe this, I know in the comments we said we can't have the super architect, but maybe the super architect could be this game changer for the trifecta of the MSP, MSS, and end customer.
Yeah, thanks again for that question. Right, so most architects are super architects. especially in Trinidad and Tobago, where we may not have a large pool of architects. Because what does it, first we have to understand the role of the architect. What does the architect do, right? So essentially, the architect is that person who defines the security strategy and then builds an architecture that will be tailored for a particular organization. The architect normally should not be the one that would implement components within the design, right? So you need to have proper separation of duties, as well as the architect should not be the one, monitoring the activities that take place within the ecosystem, right? But what you find happening is that you have super architects doing everything, doing the design, the implementation, as well as the monitoring. So I have found myself in that position many a time. So when I'm wearing my architect hat, right? My role is to liaise and to advise senior management and the decision makers on what is required usually based on some risk assessment. What is required for the organization? What is needed for the organization to maintain a particular risk or security profile? And that usually entails having meetings and trying to convince people who don't really want to spend extra money that putting in a particular piece of equipment or making changes based on the business or technology environment, making changes so that we adapt appropriately to those changes, to those changes within the environment. That is not always very easy to do because you have to convince decision makers to spend money, and sometimes you have to come up with very creative ways of convincing those individuals that they really need to spend money. And usually you have to show and you have to demonstrate the impact on the organization if we do not spend on a particular piece of architecture. So the super architects, the ones that would have probably a great amount of experience behind them, they will understand the importance of having a managed security service provider as being part of your architecture. So when you're defining your strategy, you will include components within there, and one or two of those components may involve having a third-party vendor like a managed service security provider. And why it's important to have that, because you also need to have additional pairs of eyes to take a look at what's taking place within your environment, because sometimes you may miss something and you miss it, but if you have a third party looking at it, they may pick it up and it may be something very, very serious. As one of the fundamentals of defining a security architecture is having what we call defense in depth. So it's like an onion. So you have multiple controls in place, and having an MSS within your environment, you can consider that a big control. Having multiple controls in place, multiple fences in place, will help prevent or detect or help you to respond to any security event that may take place within your environment, because some organizations find themselves in a situation where a security event took place and they are not aware. Months pass and they have no idea that a threat vector or a threat agent or some ransomware group has access, or actually owns, as we say in the field, owns their network or owns all of their systems, because they have access to everything, and they are none the wiser. So if they had probably someone looking at their system, like a managed security service provider, they would have been able to detect that intrusion very, very early, and they may have even been able to be in a position to prevent it from happening.
Yeah, and that's good, because again, the internal architect need not fear losing their job. The MSS can be a trusted partner, just like the MSP may have in the past been afraid that an MSS will steal their lunch. Now they're like, well, they definitely don't fix printers, so that's good. So I just want to squeeze in this question to Shiva Parasram then. In TNT, we spoke on a pre-call that, you know, there are people that you train up and they spend a lot of money on certs and then they find employment abroad, which is good for them, fine. But do you think that having locally based MSS and MSP players, more of them, can solve a skill shortage, but also help them rotate between roles, help with their development, and ultimately keep talent within TNT?
Oh, definitely. Any sort of opportunity that would help put skilled people in the right positions would be most welcome, especially if the actual position reflected the salary as well. That would be excellent, because I think that is, one of the main reasons why people look outside. But the opportunities here, you find that they really just take a network administrator or a systems administrator and then tell you, okay, well, you need to be responsible for this, as what Anthony mentioned and what Joel in the chat mentioned. It's the super architect. So I think that if we have more MSS type activity and working together with businesses, whether it be large enterprises, SMBs, I think that we could actually, raise the standard for having dedicated cybersecurity professionals here, making people more comfortable with operating in this role, working together with managed security services as well. Because if you have less focus on constantly putting out fires, yes, you are dedicated to what you would be doing, you should be able to grow and excel at this instead of, having to be kept back dealing with all of these other things. But again, yes, it does go back to the hiring practices and the budgets and everything out there.
Yeah, it is a tricky one. But hopefully we can make some headway with our debate. There are some aspiring architects out there in the audience today, not just from TNT. I know we got a couple from Curacao and Puerto Rico as well. So, and probably some other place, but you're welcome too. Shiva, Bissessar, any parting thoughts then? What would your advice be then? Improving this MSS MSP relationship through the prism of architecture, just seeing it as architecture rather than scaring new entrants to the market by saying you got to go do quantum encryption. I'm making things up, but what would your message be to them, Shiva, Bissessar?
Going back to something that Peyson said earlier, which basically alluded to you don't know what you don't know. And you think that your IT operations are basically covered, but there are risks out there that you don't recognize that possibly a third party can assist you with via monitoring, etc. And something that Shiva mentioned as well towards what I would say is or the previous question, what I would say is more required is a build out of the ecosystem. So you need an ecosystem that can churn out resources with a security focus that are readily absorbed by the country. And it's only in that way we develop ourselves as a nation and we develop ourselves as a leader within the sector, if that is what we would like to see. Like yourself, I've heard anecdotally that a lot of security specialists come from Trinidad, but they don't work in Trinidad. They work elsewhere. And they, people are people. They put in a lot of money into this thing, and they go where they are rewarded. So if we're serious about developing entrepreneurs and developing a service sector that has a specialization within security, we really need to build out the ecosystem that fosters and can achieve that.
That ecosystem, absolutely key. And, if we had more time and were more adventurous, which I'd like to do on another event in the future, we could explore maybe saying hello to people that speak Spanish, because that's a great market. We could touch that. Yeah, we could touch that area too. We could talk about regional cooperation. We could talk about, back office opportunities for, places like the United States. Not everyone has to be 100% part of the United States to service them, and that would keep talent there. Damien has a nice question. As Mr. Parasram said, I would like to add that the process needs to change before any playing can begin, which is really key. Lots of topics, and you know what? We could keep it going. We could, but we are now over time. So please give a warm round of applause to Shiva Parasram, Shiva Bissessar, and Anthony Peyson. Thank you for being such great panelists.
Thank you very much for having us.